Shockman appeared on the TurboGrafx-16 in 1992 and is the second in a series of Japanese games called Shibu... yeah, you can pronounce that one. Did I say second? Yep, this is the second of the games from Japan, and was the only one ported over to America, with the name subsequently changed to Shockman. The game starts off with the lamest title screen of all time. No music, no sounds, no nothing. Hello? Hello? Is this thing even on? After pressing run, we are treated to, luckily, a somewhat interesting opening scene. But because the game is a sequel, the whole thing makes almost no sense at all. It's not until reading the manual summary that you get a slight hint of what is going on. The game wants to supply us with an interesting story and characters, but it fails to do just that, at least to us here in the US, who only got this installment of the series. The manual reveals that two humans, Arnold and Sonia, were transformed into Shockman cyborgs to help defend the city against an evil army. Well, now that the town is at peace, the scientist who transformed them initially says he will revert them back to human form. But when they get to him, they find the scientist has been kidnapped and are now on a mission to get him back. At first glance, the game seems like a typical 2D side-scrolling platformer, reminiscent of Mega Man. Your character has a regular weapon and a charged weapon called the Shock Beam that does a little more damage. You also have a special version of this attack that is, well, special. Along the way, defeated enemies drop down red batteries which increase your life gauge, black batteries that fill up your life gauge, and bits which increase your weapon strength. Truthfully, the game does not do that great of a job with this typical platforming style, and it quickly becomes boring. So it's very refreshing to find that there are underwater and overhead shooting stages which are pretty well laid out. After a handful of areas, I found myself slowly getting into the game as the levels get longer and become a lot more varied. The 3 shooting stages, underwater and up in the air, are the best thing about the game, and the bosses are all pretty large and unique. The graphics, which often seem cheesy and sorta plain, explode with parallax scrolling and really cool enemies during these scenes. Your character moves a tad slow as he shoots, which screws up with dodging certain attacks, but it's passable. I find myself switching between the turbo and non-turbo settings on the controller as I quickly flip between charged weapon and non-charged weapon. I like using Sonia as a character because her special shock beam does a lot of damage and also replenishes her life bar. It's especially useful in the final stage against the second battle with Jita. Oh, who is Jita, you ask? Well, he's introduced in the storyline as if we already know who he is, seems to be another cyborg, and appears a couple of times for us to fight. And again, we're supposed to feel for the character, but we don't. Anyway, back to Sonia. I like her special weapon. But what's with her and Jimmy Dean? She must really like sausage. Wow, that didn't sound right at all. Arnold controls fine and is rather identical to her. His shock beam just sucks. So what happens as the game progresses? Well, we meet someone named Mew, who dies, and we really don't care. You also finally save Doc, and how does he repay you? By transforming you into a ship so you can go fight some more. Now that's gratitude for you. All of this is rather cheesy, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way, like the instant death plan. Wow, I can't even comment on that one. The game has unlimited continues, and with only 1 life per character, you'll be starting over quite often. Unfortunately, the game chooses at times the worst place to have you continue. Either it's so far back into the game that you want to cry as you backtrack, or it's right before a dialogue scene that the game forces you to watch over and over and over and over. It takes frustratingly way too long to get to the final boss after you continue. This was one of the reasons I stopped playing the game the second time I reached the final stage. Why did I stop playing the first time I got to the last stage? Oh, because of this. Yeah, the game froze as it was loading the final boss battle. Ah yes, a sign of great things to come. There is a 2-player mode, allowing you and a friend to team up. You can also combine your energies to produce a more powerful version of the shock beam, This makes the game a little more fun. Shockman is a cute little game that has some unique variety, switching from platformer to shooter and back again. The platforming stages are only average and are completely eclipsed by the shooting stages, until you reach the back end of the game when the platforming stages do get a little better. But then it forces you to backtrack every time you continue, driving you crazier and crazier until your head explodes, or the game freezes. I know I'm being hard on Shockman. It did grow on me as I spent hours playing it. The colors are great, and there is some nice detail at times, but in the end, I feel like there is just something missing in the entire experience. Maybe it's a lack of story and character development that we just don't have here in the States. Maybe the cheesy platforming in most of the game is boring. Maybe, I just can't say the damn Japanese name, whatever it is, I have a tough time recommending Shockman. It's not completely horrible, but something's just missing. 2.5 turbo chips out of 5.